DJ Scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Hood rich.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And this evening we have some appetizers for you, and I'm talking about these are some tasty appetizers. And I'm talking about UFC 299, O'Malley versus Vera 2. And this card is it is March 9th, 2024, so Saturday, should be on tomorrow at the Casilla Center in Miami, Florida. United States, and that should be held at 10 Eastern, 9 Central time. And so this is UFC 299, and I already, I'm sure a lot of people are comparing and contrasting this card to UFC 300, and just a little bit of my thoughts on this before I get into the fights and the main card. I think this card alone is just as good as UFC 300, just because of the fact that it has the Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera rematch on it, which is something that's been built up and should have been already happened like 4 years ago. So there's been like a 4-year build up for that fight, and like the only thing that UFC 300 has that UFC 299 doesn't have is that they have two title bouts and one and a third, I guess a third title one if you want to include the BMF title as well. But just the Sean O'Malley Marlon Vera main event for the bantamweight championship is a trump card for the entire UFC 300 card. So I like this card. I think it's going to be good, and even the undercard, which I'm not going to really go through, but I'll go over it real quick just because of some of the fighters on the card, because this whole card is worth watching, honestly. Because I mean, you got Ian Kutalabe on the early prelims, you got Pedro Munez versus Kyler Phillips on the preliminary, you got Rafael Dos Anjos, Macy Barber, Curtis Blades. Like those are fights just on the preliminary card. So a lot of times I kind of opt out on watching the preliminary card, but there's some big names even on that part of the card besides the main card. But there's just a lot of history behind this card, and I think the drama and the build up to it is maybe what makes this card more interesting to watch than UFC 300, is just because that Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera 2. That's something to be seen. If you consider yourself an MMA fan or a UFC fan, you can't miss out on that. But anyways, let's get into this main card. UFC 299, Marlon O'Malley versus Vera 2. So can I get a menu? So we're starting out here on the main card here, the main card, the pay-per-view card. And so the first fight on the pay-per-view card is about between Peter Yan and Song Yadong. And just kind of like the whole press conference and weigh-ins, it seemed like for each fighter or each fight, there was one fighter that kind of wanted to talk trash and build the fight up. And I think there was between like every fighter on the main card, there was a bit of a language barrier. So one would talk trash and the other one would be kind of mumbling to try to figure out what they said so they could talk trash back. But there really wasn't much of that. There wasn't as much of that as I would have expected. But anyway, so Peter Yan, who just a couple of years ago seemed like he was like the most dominant, most dominant at his weight class there for a while, because he had the belt. That was at bantamweight. Trying to see, yeah, at bantamweight. So that was all the way. He won that back at, let's see, yeah. So that was back in like 2020. He was considered a lot of people considered him like the best bantamweight there for a while because he won the belt, then lost it, and then won an interim belt, and then lost it again. And since the Aljamain Sterling losses, he just hasn't been right. And with him, he's like style is like boxing, but definitely during his title reign there, you could definitely see he was really taking advantage and using his Brazilian jiu-jitsu and wrestling more to beat people than anything. But I don't know. Since the Aljamain Sterling loss, he's really fallen off, you know. And I was wanted to state this about like every fight. Every fight has like a veteran fighter or a stepping stone gatekeeper kind of fighter fighting. You know, besides the main event, that's pretty much how all these fights are set up. It's like an older veteran seasoned fighter against like a young up and coming bright star type of fighter. And that's, I mean, it shows you how quick the landscape of things change because Peter Yan was that young, talented, up and coming fighter just, you know, 3-4 years ago. And now, hell, this was a statement that Sean O'Malley had about Peter Yan that heck, he's 1-2 more losses away from being in bare knuckle boxing. So BF, what was that, BKFC or whatever. So, but it's true. It's true because if you go over his last 6 fights, he is what 2-4 over his last 6 fights, and has lost lost 3 in a row. Which I understand the losses have been 2 to Aljamain Sterling, who was the champion and was really good there for a while until Sean O'Malley beat him, and then he lost a split decision to lost a split decision to Sterling, but lost a split decision to Sean O'Malley, which some people would actually can think you could go back at that fight. It was a split decision. So a lot of people thought that Peter Yan won that fight, and then this lost another decision to Merab Dashwili. So nothing has been falling his way really here recently for Peter Yan. But total matches, he has 21 fights with 16 wins and 5 losses. And surprising because it seemed like he was really dominating people during his little title run, that he was really dominating people with like his Brazilian jiu-jitsu and his wrestling. You know, he was kind of like a Mighty Mouse type of fighter. You know, a small little bitty guy. You know, height wise at least only 5'7", 135 pounds. So it's kind of weird seeing him fighting Sean O'Malley, who's like 6 foot. But anyway, so he has 21 fights with 16 wins, 5 losses. In the 16 wins, 7 of them came by knockout, and only 1 by submission. That's why I saw it kind of weird because, you know, from my not great memory, but I remember him really like dominating people on the ground. Maybe that's where these 8 decisions came in. He had 8 wins by decision, where maybe he was just holding people down and laying and praying, and then won some of his fights like that. And then in the loss category, has 5 losses, never been knocked out, never been submitted, has 4 wins by decision, or 4 losses by decision. Which those are all the ones I just went over. And then the 1 DQ by Aljamain Sterling, which was a big drama of titles changing hands due to a disqualification. But yeah, so it's pretty clear that he's really fallen off since his last title reign. You know, that's a dig of a statement by Sean O'Malley about the BKFC stuff, but it's true. I mean, you lose 1 or 2 more fights, man, you're going to be out of the UFC. And then he is fighting Song Yadong. And he's a younger up and coming fighter. So Peter Yan is kind of set up as like the gatekeeper, maybe lost a step, washed fighter who's supposed to lose in a dramatic fashion to build up the career of a fighter like Song Yadong, who is his fighting style is Sanda, which is like what is like the Japanese or the Chinese version of like boxing. And in his last 6 fights, he is 5-1 in his last 6 fights, and half of those wins coming by TKOs and KOs. So pretty impressive, and he's on a two fight winning streak. Win a TKO punches win over Ricky Simone, and a decision win back in December over Chris Gutierrez. But he's considered himself. I think he considered himself. This was during the press conference where he like considered himself like the best boxer in the UFC. I think that was a statement from Song Yadong. Song Yadong. So that's kind of a interesting statement there from him. And he's won 30 fights, or has had 30 fights. So that's a lot of fights for someone that's only 26 years old. So he's had 30 fights with 21 wins and 7 losses. In the 21 wins, he has 9 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission, and 9 wins by decision, no disqualifications, and then has a draw and a no contest as well. And then in the 7 losses, he has 2 losses by knockout, never been submitted, and then he has 4 by decision and 1 by disqualification. So he considers, I guess he considers himself a boxer, a striker. Obviously, he's not much of a Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist. I'm sure he has the skill, but he's not out there submitting people. Never, I guess he has had 3 submissions, but he's never been submitted. But I was talking about the language barrier earlier. That the media people were asking Song Yadong and Peter Yan like questions, kind of angled at them trying to like talk trash towards one another, and you didn't really get much out of Peter Yan because of the language barrier. But anything in English coming out of Song Yadong's mouth was that I'm going to knock him out. I'm going to knock him out. So I guess that's what he'll be looking to do. But in this fight, this bantamweight bout between Peter Yan versus Song Yadong, I'm going to go with Song Yadong to win this. I just think Peter Yan is kind of lost a step. I don't know. They have him set up as being washed and kind of a gatekeeper stepping stone for this fight, and I think that's how it's going to go. I don't think Song Yadong's going to knock him out or get some crazy submission or anything, because Peter Yan has showed that he's durable, never been knocked out, never been submitted. But I just think he's going to get outpaced and beat on for 3 rounds by Song Yadong, the younger, more talented and up and coming fighter. So, and the bantamweight bout between Peter Yan versus Song Yadong, I got Song Yadong winning by decision. All right. Now then, on to the welterweight bout between Gilbert Burns versus Jack Mandela. Mandolina, Jack Della Mandolina. And Gilbert Burns, he's basically the kind of the version of Peter Yan. You know, he's the older fighter that's fought a bunch in the UFC. I mean, heck, he's 37 years old. He'll be 38 in July. So I mean, just that alone kind of tells you where Gilbert Burns is currently in his career. You know, obviously he's not like a young up and coming fighter on the cusp of getting a title fight or a title reign or anything like that. I would say his best days are come and gone at the age that he is, but he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu and a wrestler. He's definitely put on some master classes of wrestling and Brazilian jiu-jitsu back in his career, like from like 2018 to 2020. He was like amazing, won like 6 fights straight. But since then, he's kind of slowed down, and I would probably directly relate that to probably the age more than anything, because during that period, that 3-year period, man, he was dominant. But he's had some losses since then. So in his last 6 fights, he's 3-3, but those losses have come against like Bilal Muhammad, the Will the title bout for Bilal Muhammad ever come? I don't know, but he just beats people. But so lost his last fight to Bilal Muhammad. He lost to Hazmat Jamaya, a decision. That was back in April 9th, 2022. And a lot of people, he probably gave Hazmat Jamaya the best matchup of his career, best fight of his career, because he was mostly just running through people before then. And then he lost the title, his like one only title bout. He lost to Kamaru Usman by TKO punches, and that was all the way back like February 13th, 2021. And then in some of the wins, he's just decisions, and he had a submission arm triangle choke out of Nil Magny. But in his total 28 fights, he has a 22 wins with 6 losses. In the 22 wins, he has 6 wins by knockouts, 9 wins by submission, and 7 wins by decision. And then in the 6 losses, he's been knocked out twice, never been submitted, and has 4 wins by decision. So that basically shows you that he can beat you in any variable ways. Knock you out, can use his great Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills to submit you, or he can go the distance with you. But then same with that great Brazilian jiu-jitsu skill. He's never been submitted, so he feels very comfortable on the ground. So definitely a tough fight for anyone. But he's fighting Jack Della Maddalena, who once again here we're talking about this young up and coming fighter who's only 27 years old. And his style is boxing, and he's also ranked in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's just on a bit of a run here. Interesting career when you kind of look at it. So in the UFC, he has, let's see, he's undefeated in the UFC on a 7-fight winning streak, and then just in his career in general, he's on a 16-fight winning streak because he lost the first 2 fights of his career. So hey, if nothing else, that shows that he has like the will to succeed and will to win, because he didn't give up even early in his career back in 2016 when he lost his first 2 pro fights. So that tells you something. That tells you a little something about Jack Della Maddalena. He's definitely a tough guy that's confident, and he's going to pursue his goal to win. But let's see, in his last 6 fights, obviously he's 6-0, but 3 of them have came by TKO, and then he had a submission, rear naked choke over Randy Brown. But in his 18 fights, in his 18 matches, he has 16 wins with 2 losses. In the 16 wins, 11 of them have come by knockout, 2 by decision, 2 by submission, and 3 by decision, and then 1 loss by knockout, 1 by submission. So even though it was years ago, 8 years ago, that he's been knocked out and submitted, so he can be knocked out, he can be submitted. But with his boxing, his striking predominantly is what he's wanting to do, and he's got those 11 knockouts to his credit. So I imagine that's what he's going to try to do. So in this welterweight bout between Gilbert Burns versus Jack Della Maddalena, I think I'm going to go with Jack Della Maddalena, just because we could just kind of like Song Yadong. He's the young up and coming fighter, definitely fighting the older fighter. Can't really say Peter Yan is old because he's only 31 years old, but going to be 38 soon, fighting a guy in his prime in Jack Della Maddalena. So and let's see, Gilbert Burns has been knocked out before as well, twice in his career, and that's what Jack Della Maddalena is known for. So in the welterweight bout between Gilbert Burns versus Jack Della Maddalena, I'm going with Jack Della Maddalena. I think he's going to knock Gilbert Burns out, and I was a big fan Gilbert Burns during that 2018 to 2020 run that he was having, undefeated streak that he was on. So, and who knows if he loses, gets beat in impressive fashion, this could possibly be Gilbert Burns' last fight. All right. Now then, on to the welterweight bout between Kevin Holland versus Michael Page. Michael Venom Page, MVP. So this is something that should have happened probably 5 years ago, honestly, with Michael Page, Michael Venom Page, MVP. He was fighting a good portion of his career, most of his career in Bellator, and pretty much ran through Bellator his entire time there, and was a superstar while he was in Bellator. So I don't know what led to him not getting to the UFC sooner, or was it money, or was it something to do with him being a foreign fighter? I mean, that shouldn't really matter. He was from England. But well, like I was just saying, this should have happened like 5 years ago, because he's 36 years old. He's like close to the same age as Gilbert Burns, who I could easily see this being his last fight, you know. But so we have Michael Venom Page. You know, a lot of fans of MMA know who he is just because of how he was a superstar and how he built himself up at Bellator, and how this fight should have happened. Him fighting in the UFC should have happened like years ago. But anyways, it's here now, and hopefully he still has a couple good fights left in him. But in his last 6 fights, he is 5-1, and won his last fight, which was against Gadi Yamuchi, which was at Bellator 293 back in March 2023. And then his most recent loss was the fight before that, which was against Logan Stortley, which was a split decision, and that was all the way back May 13th, 2022. Then prior to that, he was on a 6-fight winning streak, and he would consider himself, I guess you would consider him a kickboxer, is what you can consider Michael Venom Page. Definitely over his career, he's always looked to get like the crazy highlight reel knockouts. But in his 23 fights, he has 21 wins with 2 losses. And in those 21 wins, he has 13 wins by knockout. So that's the kickboxing, you know, the striking that comes into play there. He has 3 wins by submission and 5 wins by decision. So he's a well-rounded martial artist, but he's kind of like I wouldn't even want to, he's like the always say best choice, great value, modern day Anderson Silva, kinda, I guess. I don't even like saying that, but that's the kind of style that he is. He's like a knockoff version of a knockoff modern day version of Anderson Silva, kinda. And then in his 2 losses, he's lost just 2 fights, just one by knockout and then one by decision. And his knockout loss, came back all the way May 13th, 2019 to Douglas Lima, which was just a KO punch. He's showed pretty strong jaw since then. And then his opponent, Kevin Holland. So this is kind of like the opposite of the first 2 fights in regards to like young and up and coming fighter getting his first big match in the UFC against an older veteran, maybe lost a step kind of wash fighter. Like it's opposite. It's flipped around now, because this is Michael Page's first fight in the UFC, and he's already 37 years old, but he's fighting Kevin Holland, who some would say is like a fan favorite. And I mean, he's 31 years old, so he's like the same age as Peter Yan. But I think just in the UFC, he's kind of hit, even though he's not that old, he's kind of hit the mark of kind of being like a gatekeeper, a stepping stone type of fighter. And I mean, you could look all the way back to UFC 279, which was September 10th, 2022, when they flipped weight classes or completely flipped opponents, like within like what 48 hours of the pay-per-view, where he went up in weight to fight Hazmat Chimaev because Hazmat Chimaev didn't make weight, couldn't make 170, so he had to fight at 180. So ever since then, I feel like he's kind of been like that stepping stone gatekeeper, because he, in his last 6 fights, he is 3-3, but he's lost to Stephen Thompson. That was a TKO, was corner stoppage. So I don't really look at that really as a gatekeeper type of fight. But then he beat Santiago Ponzinibbio and Michael Chiesa, and then in his last fight, he lost to Jack Della Maddalena in a split decision. So there's a young up and coming fighter that he was faced off against and lost. And I look at that pretty similar to his loss to Hazmat Chimaev. So it feels like people call him a fan favorite, but I think that's more of like his attitude towards the game and the press conference stuff. He's good at talking, but just as a fighter in general, I wouldn't place him that high on very many lists. But in his, and he would be considered, I guess you would consider him like a kung fu Brazilian jiu-jitsu type of fighter, like a very well-rounded fighter. And he's had a lot of fights for someone his age as well. He's had 36 fights with 25 wins and 10 losses. And he has 14 wins by knockout, 7 wins by submission, 4 wins by decision, and then in the 10 losses, he's been knocked out just once, submitted 3 times, and then lost decision 6 times, and then has a 1 no contest. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson did knock him out, but it was due to corner stoppage. It wasn't like he was TKO'd or left cold or anything. But I just feel someone is going to get knocked out in this fight, just because that's both of these fighters, that's their predominant way of winning these fights, is getting a knockout. So I think so just because it's been a long time coming, and I've been wanting to see Michael Venom Page MVP fight in the UFC for so long. This is almost more of a fan pick, because I really look at these two fighters as pretty even and pretty similar in their style and what they want to do. They want to get the knockout. So I think someone's going to get knocked out regardless of who wins. So in the welterweight bout between Kevin Holland versus Michael Page, MVP, Michael Venom Page, I'm going with MVP. I think he's going to get the knockout in this fight. All right. Now then, onto the co-main event. We have Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint-Denis. And so Dustin Poirier, who I don't think he's fought for a while. It's been a little while since he's fought, I do believe. Well, I guess it hasn't been that long. It was back in July 29, 2023, but it was a pretty brutal knockout, KO, knockout loss to Justin Gaethje. That was for the BMF title, and I think most people would probably consider Dustin Poirier as like a striker that uses his wrestling when the striking fails, or when people that are striking or he's fighting with try to attempt to take him down. That's definitely what his best skill set would be, I would imagine, striking and his wrestling game. I think, was he at American? Yeah, he was at American. He is at American Top Team, has been since 2012. So that's all those guys are about, is wrestling. Let's see, and he's had some big fights in his last 6 fights. So he is 4-2 in his last 6 fights, and man, he's just fought a masterclass of fighters. He's put in the seventh fight there. He has a loss to Khabib Nurmagomedov, Dan Hooker, 2 fights against Conor McGregor, a loss to Charles Oliveira, a submission win over Michael Chandler, and the pretty brutal, devastating knockout that he received from Justin Gaethje. And he's had 38 fights. He's an older fighter too, just like some of all these other guys. They're in their later 30s. He's 35 years old, and is that what he's set for? Is he's Benoit Saint Denis? Is Dustin Poirier going to be a stepping stone for him? I don't know. Is he a gatekeeper now? Is he washed? Uh, is he lost a step? Maybe he has lost a step after getting his head kicked off by Justin Gaethje. But in his 38 matches, he's had 29 wins and 8 losses, 14 by knockout, 8 by submission, 7 by decision. And in the 8 losses, he's been knocked out 3 times, he's been submitted 3 times, and he's lost 2 by decision as well. So you see that he can beat you in a variety of ways, but he can also be beaten in a variety of ways. He can be knocked out. He can be submitted. So this will be interesting how this fight goes. I almost kind of look at him like Gilbert Burns. You know, if he gets beat down real bad in this fight, it wouldn't surprise me if Dustin Poirier retired. So he is fighting Benoit Saint Denis, and he's 28 years old. See what I'm saying? Another young fighter, and he's a varied style of fighting. You know, he's the kickboxer, judo, BBJ. So he does it all. He wrestles. He has Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and he's got great striking as well. And let's see, he's having a great a great run here in the UFC right now. So he's 5-1 in his last 6 fights, and the one was his first fight in the UFC, which was UFC 267, which was 2021 October 30th against Lizis Zalewski dos Santos. But since then he's been on a terror. He's on a 5-fight winning streak with wins by way of submission, rear naked choke, TKO punches, face crank. That just sounds painful. TKO punches and KO head kick, which is that's Dustin Poirier's last loss, came by way of a head kick. So that's kind of interesting. So in his last 5 fights, in his 5-fight winning streak, all of them have come by way of finish, at least by way of the second round. So no one's getting out of the second round here lately with Benoit Saint Denis, and in his 15 fights. So he's a young fighter. I've been going over a lot of these records and stuff of some of these fighters, and heck, they've almost had 35, 40 fights. And here we have a young fighter, a 28-year-old, you know, in his prime, in the peak of his career. And he's had 13 wins and just one loss, and then a 1 no contest. In the 13 wins, 4 of them have come by knockout, 9 have come by submission, and then the 1 loss came by a decision. So, man, he's on a hot streak, and he's fighting a fighter, you know, that's towards the tail end of their career. And I don't think I've mentioned a fighter losing or winning by submission yet. And Dustin Poirier, I mean, he's never lost 2 fights in a row in the UFC. So if he was to lose to Benoit Saint Denis, that would be a first for him in his career, because he did lose to Justin Gaethje, and that would be losing 3 of your last 4 then. And he's lost 3 fights, 3 of his fights that he lost. 3 of his 8 losses have come by submission, and the majority of Benoit Saint Denis wins have been by submission. 9 of them were by submission. and he's finished people with face cranks and rear naked chokes, and that's how Dustin Poirier lost his last fight by submission was the rear naked choke to Charles Oliveira. So in the co-main event, making a long story short here, in the co-main event lightweight bout between Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint Denis, and this is a 5 round co-main event. So I'm going to go with Benoit Saint Denis to get a 4th round submission victory in this fight. And I know that's kind of a daring pick to make, seeing how Benoit Saint Denis hasn't been in any like real. He hasn't even fought a 3 round fight in like his last several fights. I'm trying to see how long it's been since he took a fight to the distance. Yeah, so it was that last fight at UFC 267 back in 2021 since he had a fight actually go 3 rounds. So saying that, it'd be interesting to see what Benoit Saint Denis looks like in the championship rounds, the 4th and the 5th round. But I'm going with Benoit Saint Denis to get a 4th round submission. I'm thinking a rear naked choke over over Dustin Poirier. So we may get to see multiple fighters lay their gloves down at the end of this card or at the end of their fights. I would not surprise me at all from Gilbert Burns or Dustin Poirier or even Michael Page. You know, he was talking so glowingly about the UFC and how, which was surprising, seeing how he's been kind of out, kind of been left out of the fold of the UFC so long. But he was just talking about how you were treated like a superstar, and everything they do is so professional. Like he may retire if he loses to Kevin Holland, or maybe even if he wins, that he may just put that as like the mark of his career that he finally made it to UFC. I mean, he was talking glowingly about a promotion and a company that hasn't let him in the door majority of his career. But yeah, I got Dustin Benoit Saint Denis for that one. All right, so now on to the main event. This is the bantamweight bout between the bantamweight title bout between Sean O'Malley, the champion, versus Marlon Vera, the challenger. And so this is Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera too. This is the rematch, and this is such a wild fight for me to kind of understand because Chito Vera, he's a striker with Brazilian jiu-jitsu, so he's just like your classic Brazilian fighter. Sean O'Malley wanted to seemed like he wanted to have a back and forth trash talking with Marlon Vera, but like I said earlier, the language barrier kind of kept that from happening as well as we'd like to see. I don't think anyone has it quite as well. That's the one thing that people took for granted with Conor McGregor. You just don't see that fire from anyone anymore, trying to get under people's skin, and even when you do see it, it feels very, very, very fake, very phony when people do try to act like that. But you saw some of that from Sean O'Malley, but Marlon Vera wasn't really biting on it very much. He was having to have a linguist break it down for him. So it's kind of hard to say that the linguist is as salty when telling them what the other person said. It probably doesn't come out quite the same. But in his last 6 fights, Marlon Vera is 5-1. Yeah, he's 5-1 in his last 6 fights, and his last fight was a win over Pedro Munez. But then he had also, prior to that, he had the loss to Corey Sandhagen. And then what I go back on is that this fight, like, it's wild to think that it's been 4 years since the first fight happened, which was a win by Marlon Vera, TKO punches and elbows over Sean O'Malley. And then the fact that he hadn't had a rematch, not even against Sean O'Malley, but Aljamain Sterling or Peter Yan or any of those guys that held the belt before Sean O'Malley. Because I mean, yeah, he lost the next fight after that, to Jose Aldo, which I mean he's a Hall of Famer. Jose Aldo is, but then he won 4 fights in a row. You know, knocking out like concaving, having like arguably the knockout of the year over Frankie Edgar when he concaved his face with the front kick, and then he beat another Hall of Famer. You know, arguably one of the best, one of the best. What is this? The bantamweight fighters in UFC history, and Dominic Cruz knocked him out cold with a head kick. Just wild, really, that it's taken so long for these two to get back each other, like, to get to the second fight. 4 years, way too long. I think they've spent way too much time trying to build up Sean O'Malley's career and make you a new Conor McGregor type fighter, a new mouth and face of the UFC. And Marlon Vera has been kind of disrespected in regards to it. But like I was saying, he's 5-1 in his last 6 fights. Over his career, he has 32 fights with 23 wins, 8 losses. In the 32 win and 20 in the 23 wins, he has 8 wins by knockout, 10 by submission, and 5 by decision. And then he's never been knocked out, never been submitted, and has 8 losses by decision, and then just a 1 draw. So he's very durable. You know, that's all you hear from Sean O'Malley, is that he's going to knock Marlon Vera out. But Marlon Vera has been in 32 fights and has never been knocked out, never been submitted. So he's very durable. He's very tough. So I find that hard to believe from Sean O'Malley that's what's going to happen. And then so Sean O'Malley, he's just basically like a kickboxer, but he has Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills as well. Just looking at the age of these two fighters. So Marlon Vera is 31 and Sean O'Malley's 29, but he's definitely the poster boy for the UFC right now. And he's on an impressive run himself. So he's 5-0-1 in his last 6 fights. The one being a no contest accidental eye poke by Pedro Munez. And the fights that he's won, he's beat like Thomas Almeida, Peter Yan, Aljamain Sterling for the belt. That's how he won the bantamweight championship, was TKO punches on Aljamain Sterling, even though some people thought that was an early stoppage. But then we go all the way back to the only loss on his career, which was to Marlon Vera, which was at UFC 252 on August 16, 2020. And that came by way of TKO, elbows, and punches. And that was at 4:37 of the first round. And man, Sean O'Malley, he won't admit that he lost that fight, or that the fight ever even happened, with the way he's talking and the way he was trying to talk trash. He says that it was a complete fluke, and that he tried to take the commission to trial about getting it turned to a no contest, and trying to say that even they said it was a fluke, even though, I mean, I guess by the time I buy into Sean O'Malley, it'll be about the time that he's lost a step or become washed. Similar to how I was with Conor McGregor, but I'm just not buying that. I'm not buying that. I remember that fight. It's crazy that it was 4 years ago. I remember that fight. Like, came out, and they were very even in the striking. You know, both of them keeping like good distance from them. But the thing that Marlon Vera was landing, he was landing those leg kicks and those calf kicks, and then he landed one, and Sean O'Malley had to do a shimmy and shake, and his ankle rolled over, and Marlon Vera noticed it and took advantage of it and started kicking him in that leg. And before you know it, Sean O'Malley folded, and he tries to act like he didn't get TKO'd, or that it was just a no contact injury. But I remember him getting punched and elbowed in the face and the head at the end of that fight. It wasn't just because it didn't just get waved off after he rolled his ankle or couldn't walk anymore. It's because he was getting ground and pounded at the end of the fight. And even Marlon Vera said that he was asleep when the ref took him off of him. So I'm not buying that at all. That he's undefeated or unbreakable by by Sean O'Malley. So like I said, I probably won't be buying into him before he'll be washed by the time I'm buying into Sean O'Malley as a fighter and as a mouthpiece for the UFC. But he has an impressive career. He's had impressive finishes, and pretty much his whole career is just a bunch of highlights. So I got to give it to him for that. But in his 19 matches, he's had 17 wins and then just the one loss. It's a real loss to me. It's a real loss. And 17 in those 17 wins, 12 of them have come by knockout, one by submission, and four by decision, and then one no contest, which was his doing, him poking someone in the eye, him doing something illegal. Not the knockout. Then the one loss was the knockout, which was not a no contest over Marlon Vera that Marlon Vera had over him. So just saying that he's a very tough, durable fighter. You know, he's going to finish you, or that's pretty much the only way the fight's going to go is he's going to knock you out. That's about what his record shows. Besides the one loss over Marlon Vera, he's never been submitted. He's never lost a fight going to decision. But then, you know, I look back at Marlon Vera. I think he's in Sean O'Malley's head just because Sean O'Malley has like such belief in himself that he's undefeated, and what you have to in a sport like this. But he says that he doesn't think about it at all. But I find that very hard to believe that Sean O'Malley actually never thinks about that loss or never thinks about Marlon Vera or any of that. But you know, was talking about Sean O'Malley and just the one loss, and then I'm talking about Marlon Vera and his losses. So all of his 8 losses have come by decision, but he's never been knocked out. He's never been submitted. So I don't see Sean O'Malley knocking him out, and he's not a like a ground master class submission fighter. So I definitely don't see him submitting Marlon Vera either. And just I guess it'll just go to see who has the better stamina, you know, because a lot of Sean O'Malley's fights haven't gone like 5 rounds. See, he's had a couple, I guess, go 3 rounds or almost go 3 rounds. He's won 4 by decision, I guess. But just showing that both of them have been tough. Neither of them have been knocked out a bunch or submitted a bunch in their career. And I'm a Marlon Vera fan. I say it'd probably be too late by the time I'm wanting to jump on the Sean O'Malley hype train, a bandwagon. But in the bantamweight bout between Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera, I'm going with Marlon Vera to win and kind of solidify that he's the champ, the bantamweight champion, and should have been the bantamweight champion. And both of those 2 wins that he's going to have over Sean O'Malley are legit now. There's no talk side piecing about how it wasn't a real win. But I think this fight's, you know, may end up being not as exciting and a bit of a letdown in regards to like the hype behind it. So I'm going with Marlon Vera to win this fight, but it shows just off of record and history, both of these guys are pretty tough unless Sean O'Malley's ankle and calf give out again. I'm going to go with Marlon Vera to win the bantamweight championship over Sean O'Malley, and I think it's going to be a decision. I think he's just going to win decision, maybe split decision, but that's how I see it going. So let's go over these fights real quick, see if I can remember my way of winning and way of decision. So in the bantamweight bout between Peter Yan versus Song Yadong, I got Song Yadong winning by decision. You know, both of these guys are very tough and never been finished a whole lot in their career. And Song Yadong, there you go. It's picking the young up and comer to step over the doormat Peter Yan. And then in the welterweight bout between Gilbert Burns versus Jack Della Maddalena. I got Jack Della uh, Maddalena to win by knockout. You know, the older fighter, once again, it's the older fighter kind of getting ran through by the younger fighter in Maddalena. And then in the third fight on the card is another welterweight bout between Kevin Holland versus Michael Venom Page, MVP. And this is like the opposite. You know, you got they're building this fight and the hype behind it actually for the older fighter and Michael Venom Page, MVP. And I like both of these fighters honestly, but just for the fact that this is the finally Michael Venom Page MVP has finally made it to the UFC. I just want to go with him to win this fight, and I hope it happens one way or another. But I hope the outcome of this is by KO knockout, and whether it's Kevin Holland's knocking MVP out or Michael Page knocking Kevin Holland out. That's what I want to see. So in the welterweight bout between Kevin Holland versus Michael Page MVP, I got MVP winning by knockout. And then let's see, this in the co-main event, the lightweight bout between Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint Denis. It's another young fighter, prime fighter. I wouldn't even say young fighter. You know, he's 28 years old, but a prime fighter, 28 in his prime on a winning streak, fighting a fighter that's already held the belt and held glamour belts like the BMF title, or at least fought for it. Facing off a young comer like Benoit Saint Denis, but that's how all this fight. That's how all this card is basically on the main card at least. I guess besides the Kevin Holland versus Michael Page fight, and then obviously the main event. Both of the, you'd say that Sean O'Malley and Marlon Vera are both in their prime. But I'm gonna go with the young fighter. I'm gonna go with Benoit Saint Denis to get the submission actually over Dustin Poirier. His last submission loss came by rear naked choke, and I think Benoit Saint Denis is going to get another rear naked choke victory over Dustin Poirier, and I think that'll come like in the championship rounds, which Benoit Saint Denis has not experienced yet. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. And then in the bantamweight title bout between the champion Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera, you know, there's a lot of build up for this fight. You know, both of them saying, I'm going to knock you out, or Marlon Vera said, I'm going to beat you again. I'm going to do it again. A lot of fights like this always, you know, you got two tough fighters, and then the fighters end up being a little cautious and play it a little safe in a fight because neither one of them want to be the top headline in social media. So I could definitely see Sean O'Malley being very, very cautious in this fight and just not wanting to go out the way he did before, whether it's another leg injury or it's just getting TKO'd with punches and elbows again. And Marlon Vera, he's just tough as a $3 steak. So I don't see him getting knocked out or submitted in this fight either. But in the bantamweight bout between the bantamweight title bout between the champion Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera, I got Marlon Vera winning this. He's going to take the belt from Sean O'Malley, and it's may not be the most exciting fight in the world. May end up just being a decision or a split decision victory, but I got Marlon Vera winning it and doing justice to the first fight. But anyways, I think this card is good. I'm excited. I'm excited for this card. I'm even excited for the early preliminary cards and the early prelims and the preliminary cards, all that on like ESPN. I'm excited for it. And honestly, depending on how this card goes, I feel bad kind of for UFC 300 to try to beat it, you know, try to top it, because this card is really good, and I'm surprised that they didn't save some of these fights just for UFC 300. So it would be more like when UFC was UFC 100 or UFC 200. So it's got a lot. So the UFC 299 has a lot. They have some pressure behind them to be as the fighters and to have some respect for themselves. You know, that they want to put on as good of a show as UFC 300, and hopefully it turns out to be a good card, and hopefully they can put pressure on all the fighters on the UFC 300 card. But anyways, I'm excited for it, and I'm pumped. I'm really am pumped. It's been a while since I've been like this pumped and for a particular fight, but I want to see Marlon Vera beat Sean O'Malley. I said it. I already said it was going to be by way of decision, but I'd love to see. I'd honestly love to see it happen the same way it did before. Is that he kicks him in the leg a couple times with some calf kicks, and he crumble like a brick house, you know. But anyways, I think that's all I have for you this evening. So just ready for the fights, ready for it. So can I get a check, please?